Welcome, everybody, joining us at the Ukraine Media Ukraine Center. I'm Olga Tamanova on the 699th day of the full-scale invasion of our land. We'll be talking about the situation in the Ukrainian agricultural sector. Denis Marchuk is the deputy chairman of the Ukrainian Agrarian Council. Welcome, sir. In the first place, I would like to talk about the impacts for the agrarians due to the fact that our borders were blockaded. What are the implications and the consequences on your sector and economy in general? In the first place, I would like to talk about the first instances when Ukrainian produce was banned from May to April, that our produce was banned from 5 European countries. Then the Polish hauliers and farmers were blockading different crossing points. If we count all the damages that our economy has suffered, we are talking about north of 1.5 billion hryvnias. This is the money that does not come into the state budget. That is to say, all the importers and exporters have been suffering from those actions. For the future, I think we will see the implications of these actions in 2024. The reason being that all the hauliers that were stuck in those queues, they have lost all their contracts in the European countries, and I know personally about the instances when the produce was not delivered on time. Hypermarkets abandoned the cooperation with the Ukrainian hauliers. That is to say, these businesses cannot guarantee their future activities. So the consequences are catastrophic. At the same time, we are not stopping our activities. Export is going on. The Black Sea has been of help here, but since the ports in Odessa were bombed, and however, they during December exported more than 6 million tons of grain. I will put it as follows. Were it not for the Black Sea, the problems at the Polish-Ukrainian borders would have been still more serious. What about the road traffic? In the period of the peak of blockades, the traffic has decreased by 40%. These are serious numbers, especially when you talk about the western part of Ukraine, where the producers would take advantage of the countries like Poland, Hungary, and the Czech Republic. You see, it doesn't make sense to them to go to the Danube River area. So they were using the trucks going to the European zone countries, and such traffic jams in Kiev, in Volyn region, Rivne region, and others western areas that were using those crossing points. You mentioned that December was quite successful in terms of exporting produce through the Black Sea. Can we expect more good news? Yes, we have exported so far more than 2 million tons. The indicators are that we have more than 36 ships waiting for the grain to be unloaded and loaded, due to the fact that these passages have been kind of safe and the ships can go into the ports of Odessa. We can guarantee the export of oils and grains. For the next half a year, we must export something in the ballpark of 36 million tons. We were successful last year in 20 million tons. So 50 million would be accounted by grain, and the rest of that will be brought in by the oil. Let us talk about the alternative ways and the potential there. We have set up a railroad connection. How successful it has been. Perhaps there are other decisions. You see, railroads have always been active, but in general, in comparison, the monthly load of the railroad would go to 500, 600 tons. But you see, it's quite different when you compare it to the waterways. But the alternative here over the last 3 months, starting with the Polish border situation, we deployed another route from Romania. We were using the seaports, the road traffic, and these numbers speak for themselves. In the Constanta port, 40% that were reloaded there were made up by the grain cultures exported from Ukraine. The bilateral relations between Ukraine and Romania, we are now negotiating the increase of export up to 4 million tons. This is quite an impressive number. The Danube River potential would allow us up to 3 million tons. This is quite an achievement of our joint work, which of course can be an alternative way in case we see other situation issues at the border. You see, at the Romanian border, we have seen the renewal of the roadway that connects Ukraine to Romania and up to the Black Sea ports. It is a successful project for Ukraine too. It has drawn a lot of investment. The European Commission has allocated more than 280 million euros for the potential of this project to grow. This is an example how we can jointly cooperate towards new success. And Ukraine as a state has the ability to export our produce. At the same time, we have seen the blockades in the same country of Romania will not be hindering the systematic changes here. My personal take on that is that the farmers blockading roads in Romania was a consequence of the Polish farmers' protests. What they wanted, the Polish farmers, did not have any demand that were concerning Ukraine. They were talking about the dotations for the maize, for their credits. They demanded that the system of general, the taxes and levies would not grow. We saw the same situation in Romania. They were talking about the new guarantees in terms of the credits for them to receive dotations at the same time. They wanted the fuel prices not to grow. You see, sometimes it tells me that once you can't negotiate with your government, you should go and blockade the ways to Ukraine and from Ukraine, and it'll be a success story. We have seen now the announced measures for the 24th of January throughout the Polish territory. I don't exclude that partly the crossing points to Ukraine will also be blockaded. But hopefully the dialogue and the follow-up to Prime Minister Donald Tusk's visit to Ukraine, apart from the war effort, they also discuss the issues relating to agriculture. And as far as I know, there are mechanisms being developed to do away with these conflict situations to ensure that we have an opportunity for a fully fledged cooperation on both sides of the border. May I ask you the following? In general, what is your assessment of the Ukrainian agricultural sector? What's the state of affairs now? And how do you think these problems at the border will have an impact on the sowing campaign? The damages have been quite big. Once we see that the Ukrainian producers has lost billions of euros over the 2023 year, I think that 60 to 70% of Ukrainian producers in terms of sunflower and wheat and barley are losing money. You see, the ton for maize was 6,000 to 8,000 per ton. It's now up to 6,000. per ton. The same goes for the wheat, 5,000 as compared to 708. Sunflower seeds, 11 to 12,000. Now that the demand has grown, but it doesn't cover the costs that you have invested. A culture that has been so much positive, it was the soybeans, and we will see a couple of hiccups and differences for the next year, not because we are not working, but because we are restricted in our sowing campaign. We cannot use 100% of our soil banks. We are lacking current assets, and we are going back to square one. The system of crediting of agricultural producers. The program 579 will see the completion of the program, and we want the government to continue that work. Those credits have been very helpful to the producers. This money will go for recrediting to survive. If this is done, this will partly ease our problems for the producers and for the government in general. The next challenge, and I think it's challenge number one, it's the land reform. We are talking about the possibility to buy up to 10,000 square meters. You know, producers are losing money for 2 years in a row, and now they cannot buy as much a territory as 10,000. When we are not competing with major agricultural holders, they can afford to buy 10,000 acres of land. And I'm not saying anything about the number of people who have joined the army, who are helping the Ukrainian army. And now when I am asked, why is it that while our people are fighting the enemy and are in the harm's way, we are losing money? We were addressing the government and the ministry, writing a petition that has summoned more than 26,000 signatures. There has been so far no response either from the government or from the president himself. Today, Parliament has registered a draft bill on the amendments of the land reform in terms of how much territory of land can you own until the end of the hostilities and war. This will be a gesture to help the medium-sized and large-sized enterprises, because smaller owners cannot compete with large companies. You see, we should not forget about the middle-sized enterprises. They are not financed. Smaller businesses receive some help from the government, but the middle-sized enterprises don't have anything to draw money from. This is an important dialogue that we are trying to impose. We want to be heard by the authorities. When we talk about the short-term outlook, what's your assessment of the internal market? Such damages that are suffered by the Ukrainian agricultural sector, what will be the implication? You see, registers were not working at the beginning of the war. This is self-evident. We didn't see enough turnover of assets. The demand at the market wasn't there. People are not in a hurry to buy or to sell, their produce, and there is no desire to invest. In simple terms, some were conditionally saying somebody has 2 hectares of land and they have to pay 11,000 of hryvnias to buy that share. He needs to pay up, at one instance, 10,000 times more, which means that he will not be able to finance and invest into his production for the next decade, not able to create jobs, not able to buy equipment, and so on. You see, smaller enterprises cannot afford to buy such shares of land. We encourage the government not to hurry up such a procedure. International practice tells us that what they did in Lithuania, in Latvia, in Estonia, and Poland, for that matter. This is an expertise that we are banking on. And they had a transition period, for example, when the international companies couldn't buy the local land up to 500 hectares. Now that our country has politically decided to be part of the European zone, perhaps our challenge is to take on board such practices when smaller and medium-sized enterprises are supported in the first place. If we continue selling of land in that scope, do you think that in the future somebody will refrain from laying the blame at a Ukrainian door that Europe has been inundated with the Ukrainian cheap grain? It's a matter of cooperation with the European businesses where we should be paying first and foremost attention to the smaller and medium-sized enterprises. What is the general trend for the prices now? The demand in winter, as always, has been growing. We see that within country. We see how actively Ukraine is cooperating with China. The prices have somehow risen, and there is a trend that the prices will keep growing. The sunflower, partly the wheat and maize, and perhaps until the time of June, where we have a new crop, the prices will grow. Anastasia Kravchenko from Ukrinform. I've got a couple of questions for you. The first one has to do with the licensing of imports that Ukraine has suggested back in September. How that procedure is working? Are we importing produce from other countries? Do we receive such licenses? Such a system was approved by the Cabinet of Ministers in order partially to fight the shadow businesses. Enterprises must be registered through the Agrarian register. As far as I know, there are no issues with receiving licenses. As for the cooperation with Bulgaria or Romania, this has been an instrument that Ukraine suggested, and it was approved by the European Commission because it helps to resolve all the issues when those countries would not allow Ukrainian export to enter their domestic markets. We've been cooperating very good with Bulgaria because they were searching for some sunflower seeds, and they have been using this instrument. We want to have this instrument working with Poland, Hungary, and Slovakia. And let us be honest here, de facto and de jure, we are proving that we have bilateral relations, but we don't see any efficient or effective growth of the Ukrainian exports. They produce enough volume to sell. Now, this conflict situation will be settled. It gives us a lot of instruments for the future. As for the fertilizers, in January, the agrarians would inform that the fertilizers were checked, the fertilizers didn't leave the territory of Ukraine, and others would not be allowed into the country. It means that we will be having problems during the sowing campaign. As far as I know, the problem has not been settled. There's a great batch of fertilizers waiting to be delivered to Ukraine. And yet there is a conflict situation, and it has the absurd nature. They chemically are trying to figure out whether that fertilizer has been produced in Russia or elsewhere. The fact is that the checking is still going on. The importers are suffering damages. The businesses that were supposed to have bought them, they can't do that, and they will not be able to prepare those fertilizers to be put into the soil for the next crop to be grown. We are now demanding that government speed up their ways in these terms. Do you think the internal production will be helpful here? As far as I know, there is a shortage of Ukrainian-produced fertilizers. This is exactly why We have tried to import fertilizers from Lithuania, for example. Thank you very much for this information. Let me remind you, we've been talking to Denis Marchuk, Deputy Chairman of the Ukrainian Agrarian Council. We continue functioning for the sake of our victory. We thank the Ukrainian defenders, and glory to Ukraine.